Well, this one starts with a bang. Sweet Street is a 2020 short kitchen sink drama directed by Coz Greenop. It tells the story of Isabella, an immigrant sex worker in Holbeck, who enters into a sort of Romeo and Juliet type relationship with a man from normal society, shall we say. So like I said, it starts with a bang. We're thrown straight into this very intimate, sort of disgusting scenario with Isabella, and then we get to see some of this sort of cold, loud, dangerous world that she inhabits. And for those of you who don't know, Holbeck in Leeds has been sort of subjected to a sort of experiment in recent years where they've sort of legalised sex work, but only insofar as these sort of workers can meet their punters in a specific area. They can't actually do the work there, they have to take them somewhere else. So it's just made it's spilt out into the outlying areas, and this sort of thing's been going on in the waste grounds next to school, on the graveyard, on people's wheelie bins. It's not very pleasant at all, and no one's really interested in doing anything about it because they'd committed to it in the first place. I think the local MP recently has sort of admitted that the managed area hasn't been managed. Basically, is the problem. It's sort of not the concept of that, but they've just not policed it or done anything about it. They just let it run wild, despite all the locals kicking off all the time. So that's the sort of environment we're talking about here, where that she's sort of trapped in, Isabella.
I have this every single night before I go out.
So this film is it's set around and in that sort of area, but it's not really about it. It goes much deeper into the psychology of the main character. Well, yeah, no, it is clearly connected to that, though.
Okay. I'm gonna hang up now.
You should.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, I'll see you then.
So, like I said, there is a sort of Romeo and Juliet thing going on here because she's sort of in this world, in this sort of Holbeck world, and her love interest is in the normal world. So it isn't two families warring, but it's two sort of psychological mindset, because she's been stuck in this area where people sort of treat her like meat and everything's loud, everyone's arguing, there's windows being smashed, there's violence, there's drugs, there's loud music. And he lives in a sort of a more calm, a less stressful world. And her living in this world is a sort of an addiction. It's not just like she may be a drug addict, but it's the whole lifestyle that's an addiction. Like I know I talk about Darren McGarvey a lot, but it just seems everything he says in Poverty Survivor seems relevant to the sort of social realism films that I'm reviewing and trying to make. But he talks about this a lot, about how addiction is how this sort of addiction thing he had, where he would have bills to pay, and he would need to go to the doctors, he'd have medical problems, stuff like that, and it would come to sort of Friday, his money would come in, and he'd think, yeah, I'll sort those things. Well, maybe I'll just have a spliff first, or a few beers. And then those things never happen. You just get drawn back into this thing. Suddenly it's 3 days later and he's queuing outside the off licence for more beer. That's the sort of mindset that I think Isabella has that sort of mindset, that this world she lives in is so easy because she's not actually connecting to people in it. She just goes out and gets hammered, has sex with people that she gets paid to have sex with people. There's this loud music all the time. There's drugs. Senses are constantly numbed. It's like when I used to work in Tesco's and I would see people queuing up and they'd be really antsy with a crate of Stella in their hands because they've finished work 5 minutes ago. And they need to get drunk instantly because there's such a separation there. This is a bit different, but there's people working long hours, a pay that hasn't risen for like 10 years, and that they get to the end of the week and they're knackered and they just need to do something straight away that they can't do at work, so they get hammered. And it also just means that they aren't thinking about what a shitty situation they're in, that they have to work that many hours for very little, and you're working five days a week to get 2 off your whole life. Like, how much of your life are you spending working? Like, but if you just get drunk the second you finish work, you don't have time to sit down and think about that. There's different ways of sort of dealing with your problems or avoiding your problems just by getting high or getting drunk. I think that's what the film was going for. It's like her addiction is her Capulet holding her back. He sort of has the reverse problem because well, I'm going into spoilers here, but him living in a more civilized real world and then interacting with this, it's that world that's holding him back. So it's the environments of them both that are the Montague and Capulets, not actual families, if that makes sense. So they're both sort of held back by their worlds that are familiar, and they're the easier thing to embrace than the potential hurt that their heart's longing for. Yeah, the film looks stunning. The cinematography really captures the cinematography really captures that sort of the nighttime world of Isabella. It's all sort of artificial light, and it's all cold, and everything's sort of dangerous. The sound, there's all those people arguing and stuff like that. It captures that really well, and then it contrasts it with the moments of sort of freedom in the sort of real world. Like when they go to the beach, everything's sort of bright and it looks inviting, and there's a contrast there between the sort of trapping artificially lit world of the nighttime and the sort of natural way of things, I guess, where people can just enjoy each other. Oh, and that is a rumble. Is that a rumblefish? Is that a bit of a rumblefish? Bit of a rumblefish there, is there? Is that a bit of a rumblefish?
That's right, Rusty James. These are rumblefish.
So the film has a really loud, like, techno electro score. This is what I mentioned earlier about the sort of volume of things in Isabella's life. The music comes in and out really loudly as well. Like, there was one bit where they're at a party where it would clearly be there, which is that's sort of a fairly normal kitchen sink sort of thing, but the music sort of kicks in at other times as well. Like, it's more sort of in her head than actually there. It's part of her mindset, is that volume. It reminded me of Uncut Gems a bit, the music, because the music sort of seems a bit jarring, like in Uncut Gems, but I think in Uncut Gems they were just doing that to sort of add more chaos to it, because there is so much in that film. There's conflict in every scene and people shouting over each other and stuff. Like, it's sort of similar, like the volume of it, and then this music comes in that's really jarring. It's just a part of that, but I think in this film the music to her represents that sort of addiction. That volume, like I said earlier, when people drink as soon as they finish work, so they don't really have to think about how shitty their work is, or about, like, trying to get out of that situation. It seems like the music in this served a more psychological purpose than just being jarring to the audience. It's almost jarring to her as well. You know, when she gets an opportunity to leave that place, she just hears all this noise, like, don't do it, don't do it. It's too dangerous. Just stay where you're comfortable. Anyway, that's what I thought the music was doing. Anyway, so I like how the music was doing something a bit different there. I can't remember. I can't remember if that's diegetic or non-diegetic. Diegetic or non-diegetic.
I wish we'd talk normal, because I don't understand half the garbage you're saying.
Because usually in these films the music would only be playing in the scene, but this one's, it takes you out of it a bit more, but it's not taken away from it being a sort of a realist film. It's just transcending it a bit. And I think the another way it does that is by having there is humour and sweetness in there. Like, this film, it could have all been set at night, and it could have all been about Holbeck. That's what I thought was interesting, because it would be easy to do a film like that, and it would be relevant because it is a problem. But it doesn't just sort of revel in that and make it just sort of a grim poverty porn sort of thing, because it's going deeper into the psychology of that. It's not just applicable to that character, it's applicable to a lot of people who are suffering from addictions and trapped in different places. And, you know, like the sort of people who don't realise that they have a problem.
But what I also know is alcoholism's a very subtle thing, and a lot of people drink more than they think they drink, because we all are in denial about these things. And actually, a lot of people, what you'll hear them saying is, this isn't going to do anything to stop real Jake balls, but it's costing me a lot of money.
But it has these other elements, and it has these sort of surprising visual things, like the rumblefish bit. And there's a sweetness and there's humour to it that sort of transcends that, and it gives you like I'm always saying, like, you need a broader spectrum, because if it was just the grim stuff, after a bit you would just get numb to it. But because there is this sort of chance of escape, and there is this chance of human connection there, and there's some sweetness and there is some humour, it gives it a broader spectrum. It makes it more human, and it makes the grim stuff more tragic. It gives it a bigger meaning than it just being, look how this is, isn't it bad? This is like, no, why can't she do anything about that? What is the problem? And it makes you engage with it deeper. Which is that's great. That's what a film should do. It should stimulate you. It shouldn't just show you something. It should be stimulating you, and it should be taking you places you don't expect, and it does. So Sweet Street, it's a gorgeous looking film, brilliantly acted, brilliantly written. It's tackling a touchy subject with confidence. It's a psychologically complex film, but it keeps that depth below the surface. So you can you don't need that as such. You can watch it and you can watch what's happening and relate to these characters without going into the psychological depths of it. Which is, again, that's how it should work. There should be a text and a subtext. People forget that. There's too many films nowadays that just put the subtext at the top and barely even have a text. They'll just say, "This is a film about this, raising awareness for this," and it's not something that's telling a story, but also, giving you something more. Which this film does. This film knows how to balance that text and subtext brilliantly, and the score was great. I think I loved all those elements that made it really stand out. It's one of the best that I've seen for a while. So yeah, I'd definitely give it 9 out of 10. As always, the link will be below. Like, share, subscribe, all that jazz, and I'll be back next week with another indie short reviews. Ta-ra!